This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is December 17th, 2021, and I'm conducting an interview with Lou Panuse in Sun City, Arizona. Lou, would you please give me your full name and where you were born?
Louis Panuse, Long Beach, California.
Okay, and thank you. And what war did you participate in?
World War II.
When you were you born in Long Beach then? Did you grow up in Long Beach?
Yes.
And so you went to school in Long Beach, I'm assuming elementary and up through secondary?
Well, up through high school.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
What grade did you complete in high school? Did you go all the way through?
Oh yeah, I graduated as a senior, and it was the following year that Uncle Sam and I joined forces.
What year was it that you graduated?
Well, actually I graduated in 43.
Okay.
And it was 40, that's right, it was 44 when I went in the Army, and in 46 when I got out. I didn't hate the Army, but as soon as I could get out, I did. It just wasn't for me.
Yeah. So you remember Pearl Harbor, hearing about the events of Pearl Harbor then? You were in high school at the time.
I was still in high school, yeah.
What did you remember about? Do you remember where you were when you heard about Pearl Harbor?
I'm pretty sure I was at home when we heard on the radio.
What do you remember about the reaction of people around you about the news?
I was just with family at the time, and I'm not sure how we reacted, to be honest about it. I think I was kind of surprised, but that's it.
So at the time you were roughly about 16 years of age?
Yeah. I would have been just 16.
Yeah. After high school, how long? What did you do immediately when you got out of high school?
While I was killing time, I spent a year at the I think it was called the Junior College, Long Beach Junior College, or community college. I'm not sure what it was. I spent a year in college waiting for Uncle Sam to catch up with me. And
you knew Uncle Sam was going to catch up with you?
Oh yeah, at 18 I signed up.
Yeah. How did Uncle Sam catch up with you? Did you enlist, or were you drafted, or?
When I went to draft work, I had intended to sign up for a program called the ASTRP, which allowed you to stay in college as long as your grades were good and not go in. But somehow they enlisted me in just the regular reserve. And what happened after waiting for a while, wondering why I hadn't been called, I wrote to the Army, and I got a letter back saying, the only time the Army ever said please, it says, well, please sign these papers. We seem to have misplaced your file, and this will get us back there. And then I think it was just a week later, I get a little thing saying, report within, it was a week or whatever it was, to Fort MacArthur, which was the nearest Army base.
So, do you remember when that was that you reported to Fort MacArthur?
Well, the semi-discharge thing, I think it was July.
So you think it was well, it isn't that important as far as the exact date.
Somewhere.
But it was, what was it, 1944? About a year after you graduated?
1944, yeah.
Okay. So it was probably right, not shortly too long after D-Day. Do you remember hearing about D-Day? D-Day was in June 6, 1944.
It must have been shortly after, because I know it wasn't in June.
Yeah.
I think it was July, but I say I have it.
That's fine, I'll get it later.
I have a small little copy of my thing somewhere. Here are my other one. I got so damn many cards.
That's fine, I'll get it. Looks like that. Yeah, it looks like it's in 44 there. So when you went to Fort MacArthur,
Yeah.
how long were you in doing your drilling there?
I think it was only a few days because what they did, they gave us tests, they gave us a few shots like that, and the guy said, says your AGCT, which is sort of the Army's intelligence, says you've got a very good thing, but you're fresh out of school, you have no special training, so infantry.
And was it at Fort MacArthur you did your basic training then?
No.
Or they sent you to training from there?
At Camp Roberts.
It's where you did your basic training?
Yeah, this is...
Okay. And it looks like you were at Camp Roberts for quite a while, 17-week schedule.
Weeks, yeah. That was the period of our training at that point.
Mm-hmm. And it has you at Camp Roberts from August through into December of 1944.
Yeah, something like that.
So, so what are some of the things you remember doing at Camp Roberts in basic training with the infantry?
A lot of hiking, training on various weapons, including the M1, the light machine gun, bazooka, hand grenades. I'm trying to think about anything else. Oh, mortar. And then also we had like for example, we had to crawl through barbed wire with the live ammunition firing above us, and train for things like what training was is sort of like if you were in a small town or city. And of course, I ended up going the other way, which you didn't have that kind of stuff.
Yeah, yeah. Did you get trained for poison gas and things like that as well?
I don't remember. I suppose so. I suppose we were trained how to use the gas mask, but I don't really remember that part.
So you did a lot of armaments training, a lot of training with weapons, and things like that.
Training and hikes, and for our graduation we had a 25-mile hike to back to the field, and that was with the band playing when we came back, and that was our graduation ceremony. Yeah,
that was kind of your final proving ground.
Right.
Was going through So when you graduated in December of 1944, were there anybody there that you previously knew beforehand, in college or high school or in your neighborhood?
No.
Or was it all new bunch of
all new bunch of guys?
Did you befriend did you bond with any of the fellow Army personnel that you met there?
Well, I was closest to a man named John Pandria, because alphabetically we were next to each other, and we do KP and guard duty and things like that together. So even though he was older than I was, but that was the closest I came to being close to anybody at that period. And we were on the same troop ship going over too. Yeah.
Sounds good. So when you left Camp Roberts, where did you end up going? What were your orders to after leaving Camp Roberts?
Up to Fort Ord. They gave us a few days at home before that, but then we reported to Fort Ord for our little trip overseas.
So you were just at Fort Ord for just a little time, just to get you...
Just a few days. We were supposed to be taught how to swim, and I think I mentioned that I think we had 2 swimming lessons before we went off.
Hopefully enough to keep you afloat for a few minutes.
That's about what it would do. I never have really been a good swimmer.
Yeah, I understand that. Yeah. So where was your destination to from Fort Ord?
Well, the ship was by itself. It was a fairly fast and fairly new transfer, and we went solo to New Guinea.
Do you remember what the name of the ship was?
Yeah, the General Langfit, I think I've got. I wrote about it somewhere, and I think I have a copy of when we crossed the equator. We got certificate. I'm not sure if I can find it real quick.
That's fine. We'll look through it later.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, I know it was the line fit, the Samuel line fit. I think it was, but I've got it in here somewhere.
Yeah. And you went to New Guinea. Is where your initial stop was.
Either Lai or Finschhafen, and there we joined a convoy to go up to Leyte. And Leyte was a replacement depot where we were assigned to our various units.
So you were in the Pacific Theater.
Yeah, across the equator twice.
Yeah, which makes sense. You were already in California, and all that operations coming out of California.
Well, the funny thing is, I figured I'd never been out of California, or never traveled much, and I figured, hey, now maybe I get to the east part of the U.S. So I trained in California, get shipped out of California.
Nothing heading east. Everything heading the other direction.
Yeah.
When you were in New Guinea just for a short time then?
Right. I mean, just to I don't know, maybe a day or so, whatever it was, to join the convoy.
And then the convoy, you went on to Leyte.
Yeah.
From there.
Yes.
And I'm pretty sure there was some fighting still going on in that area, Leyte, or was it more of a staging area?
There wasn't any fighting by the staging area. I mean, we didn't hit any that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
And as I wrote in there that while I was there, Pandria got assigned before I was. He was assigned to something like that, so he gave me his address. And after I got settled in mine, I later wrote him, and the letter came back deceased. So evidently, if he was still on Leyte, there was still obviously still some fighting on Leyte. I assume that's what it was. I don't know. Yeah.
What was your occupation specialty, military occupation specialty, when you were dealing with infantry? Something concerning infantry?
I think the MOS is 745, which just means rifleman. If I remember correctly.
So when you arrived on Leyte, you were replacement troops?
Yeah, we were replacement troops, and we were there. We were processed and assigned to our next thing, which duties. In my case, it was next one. It's sent up to Luzon. Okay.
And what do you remember? What military unit you were part of? That you were?
Oh yeah, the 63rd Regiment of the 6th Division, and I think if I remember correctly, I think we were 1st Battalion, Company C. But I'm not 100% sure.
And you were with Company C?
Yeah.
Of the
1st Battalion.
1st Battalion.
1st Battalion of the 63rd Regiment.
Yeah.
And our regimental commander was Colonel Jan, and the introductory speech, he said, "My men would rather fight than eat." And I said, "Well, maybe you think so, but I disagree." But
yeah, I'm sure that eating was pretty important to those.
Yeah, and we were on Corregidor when I was assigned, and Corregidor had already been pretty well taken, and what our assignment was just to go through the various tunnels and make sure nobody's hiding, and we didn't find anybody there.
So you had arrived not too long after probably MacArthur had already taken back the Philippines and a lot of those lands through there.
Well, it wasn't completely under control at that time, but it was pretty well under control. But there's still fighting going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I was only involved in 2 times where bullets were around, and I've written about both of them. And one of them was while we were on Corregidor. There was another. Corregidor is a fortified island in the middle of Manila Bay, and there's at least one other smaller island there called Caballo Island. And so every so often, a few of us would be assigned there for a week, and and the island was supposed to be thoroughly taken because it wasn't very big. And this I've written about there separately, and so we're assigned there. And the first day we decided just to look around, go souvenir hunting, but we took our rifles along just in case. And at the far end, I happened to be in front, and I looked over a rock, and there's 4 Japanese soldiers sleeping there. Well, that's interesting. So I've written about it there. If I could use it to quote from memory.
Yeah.
So having seen too many war movies, I said, cover me while I climb over and go down there. I had no idea what I intended to do. Because I didn't know the word for surrender. Plus, we knew that since they knew we were there, they could have surrendered, but obviously did not. And as I'm climbing over the thing, I knocked a few pebbles down, and it woke them up. Well, like I said, there's 4 of them. Well, 2 of them woke up quite rapidly. They grabbed their rifles and ran off to the right. So I have my Garand, and I fired 1 shot just in their general direction to encourage them to keep going that way. And then I go back to the other 2 who are both reaching for the rifle, and I take turns shooting from the hip at each one. And I remember that after several shots, they were still moving. I remember somebody had told me once that if you hit somebody in the heart, they can keep going for a while. But hit them in the head, that's it. So I remember I raised the rifle slightly and fired. And there's a little clang when you shoot your clip from an M1, the Garand rifle. After the 8 shots, it shoots out so you can load another clip. I did have another clip in my pocket, but at that point I said, I've had enough of this, so I climbed back over. And we went back to the camp and got the Filipino soldiers there and went back and let them do the fighting. And I looked at the 2 guys, and they were both 30 dead, and that last shot had hit this one guy here. And I got a Japanese flag as a souvenir from him. And a cheap, non-commissioned sword, which I carried for a while and finally left behind. If I had to do it over again, I would have taken one of the caps and the rifle, but that was something at that point.
Oh, yeah, yeah. So a lot of the Filipino soldiers, they were going out and trying to find Japanese on the island. They were doing a lot of that.
Well, the thing is, we were told there was nobody there, so we were just surprised that to everybody that they had these 4 guys were sitting there, and so the Filipinos had to do the job of finishing off those 2 because I stayed in the background after that.
Yeah, yeah. So what was your job there? Were you out on search units much, or were you just guarding what you were there?
Well, we were just supposed to be sitting there not doing anything because it was not supposed to be any enemy there. And it just, our little search that we found that some of those guys were sitting there, and I don't know for how long they'd been there. Yeah,
yeah. What was your typical day when you were there? What was your typical day like? Were you mostly guarding facilities there, or
well, actually, I think we were just killing time, frankly. I mean, because we didn't, it was a very small island, and we had no idea that there was even anybody there. So I don't remember much of the details.
So this was at Corregidor?
Huh?
This was on Corregidor?
Well, Corregidor, we just did occasional patrols looking in the caves, through the caves there, and there tons of the Japanese printed occupation money all over the place. And I had a handful of that for quite a while, and I finally sold it cheaply to some collector. So I don't think I like that. But we didn't have too much duties there. I remember watching a movie of Wilson there. that sticks in my mind on that one. But I don't remember that really doing much on Corregidor.
Yeah. So what was your other incident that you said you were in harm's way, where there was some shooting going on?
Well, after that we went to the mainland, and we were on what they call the Shimbu line, and there's Mount Mataba, which I have there because there's a war correspondent came by and he said, "Anybody here from Southern Cal?" And there I am. So I've got I mentioned
article about it, yeah.
In that. And
when you're saying the mainland, or mainland Japan?
No, mainland of Luzon.
Okay.
See, go outside.
Luzon, okay.
Remember, Corregidor is an island.
Right.
And Caballo was an even smaller island. So we went to the mainland, and this is a range of mountains above Manila. In other words, at night, we could see the lights of Manila off in the distance. And I don't know, it wasn't a real high thing there. And so we were there for a while, and then at one particular point, we were told to go to to this hill facing the enemy, which is off where we couldn't see them. And Paget, the guy who was next to me alphabetically, the two of us got assigned quite often to something. So I said, producer, go out in front there and dig foxholes. This is, facing the enemy. And we're digging away happily because it's nice soft ground there. And there's either I don't remember which one it was, whether there's a Sherman or a Grant tank above us firing at the enemy, machine gun and occasional thing like that. So we didn't hear any other bullets going our way. And then finally we get a panic call. You guys, quick, come back. It turns out that two guys behind us had been hit by enemy rifle fire. Not seriously. And so that was the only other time you could say if I was in danger.
Yeah. So the rifle fire was coming from in front of you and ended up behind you? So it was going over your...
coming in the direction that we were digging our hole there. Coming from a distance that way. And
what was did you ever go through any of the tunnels that the Japanese had built?
Yeah, we went through some of the tunnels in Corregidor. Yeah, that was part of our thing. There was to go through and make sure nobody was there. But in the time I was there, that we didn't find any of the anybody left there. I think it had been pretty well cleared out.
What were the tunnels like? How tall were they, and were they rooms off of them?
It was more than you stood up easily. There's no problem. It was high enough and fairly wide too. And they'd been built quite a bit earlier, and provision, like saying that the Japanese had occupied them for some time. And
were there rooms off any of the tunnels, or wide areas where they had working areas?
I don't remember, to be honest about it. I mean, like I said, it's a funny thing how certain things I remember very clearly, like that, like my little battle there. Also, that's a minor little point. Afterwards, I made two little notches in the base plate of my of my stock of my rifle, and the sergeant said, you're destroying government property," but he was kind of smiling when he did it, so I never got any real static on it.
Yeah. Well, government's using you, and if you get injured, they're destroying government property too, which is you, right?
Right.
So how long were you on liaison?
On Luzon?
I mean Luzon.
Well, until after the end of the war, because after that, we went on patrol. We were, if I remember correctly, we went up to further northern Luzon, and we were patrolling in some of the areas there. And I remember one time there where we were up in the mountains there, and we were fairly high up. And I remember seeing it was the equivalent of a DC-3, the Army equivalent there, fly. It was below us, flying through a valley there.
Yeah.
And we went a number of patrols, but we didn't. Luckily, we didn't run anything at that particular point. And we were just. And also, I get a slight case of FUO, fever of unknown origin, which I frankly think was a mild case of malaria, but because I hadn't been taking my Atibrin, had something like 104-degree temperature, and they sent me off to this hospital there. And while I was there, I was in pretty good shape there. There was a minor typhoon there, so those of us who could stand up, which was me, had to sit there and hold the tent poles for a while to keep the thing from blowing away. Little things like that I remember.
Yeah. When you were sent for military or medical facilities, was that in Manila, or did they have other?
No, this was in northern Luzon.
In Luzon, they had a. So you didn't. It was more of a
fairly,
military hospital.
Not more of a, not exactly a MASH type of thing. I can't remember, but it was a facility that. I think it was probably for ones like myself that weren't serious things, but I remember that because I remember one thing they had for lunch was the dessert was fruit cocktail, and I wasn't hungry, and for me that's unusual. So that's when I decided that.
You spent most of your time on Luzon then, as far as your active military work.
Right.
That you were
doing.
Like
I say, and about that time, somebody discovered I had an IQ, so I was sent to radio school. And the radio school was just outside of Manila. And of course, at that point, we were supposedly starting to train for the invasion. Anyhow, so we were outside of Manila, and I was only there for a few days when they dropped the bomb, and the war ended. And that particular day, when we found out the war was over, we all went into Manila, and I got drunk for the first time in my young little life. No hangover, but got drunk. And
you were young and in shape.
yeah, well, I was in pretty good shape at that point. So, so that was. So I never did learn the Morse code. I mean, we were just starting to learn that. Like I said, I have one of my articles here is on missed opportunities, and that's one of them. Like another one that at one point while we were, I can't remember exactly where we were, but it's on Luzon. Sergeant says, you and Patchett are going to flamethrower school. Well, as I found out afterwards, that the life of a flamethrower was not maybe about equal to a B-17 tail gunner, because the enemy doesn't like being burned. Anyhow, so this is, you might say, whether you'd call this an incident or not. So we're driving towards the school, and a shell lands about half a mile or so ahead of us, not real close. And the driver turns around, looks at us, and says, I don't know if that's one of ours or one of theirs, but you guys aren't going anywhere today. And turned around and went back, and because we missed the first thing, we did not end up by going to the flamethrower school. So I never learned how to use a flamethrower. That
was probably a smart idea. So you only went to a few days of radio school too then?
Yeah, right. And then when of course that happened, that was it. So then what we did is, I forget how long it was probably a while there before we were sent up to Korea for occupation.
So getting back before you go to Korea, you went from Luzon, and then you went a ways to Manila, and on the mainland of the Philippines for radio school.
Well, Manila is on Luzon.
It is on Luzon. Okay.
Yeah, it's the capital city, and Luzon is the biggest island.
And so when you went to Manila, and were you were just there a short period of time just for the reason of going to radio school?
Yeah.
And it was there when the war ended, while you were at Manila.
Right.
Did you have any hint that things were wrapping up before you got word that the war was ended, or?
No, because we were trained. We were supposedly beginning to train for the invasion, and we had no idea that. We knew we were winning. I mean, I just put it this way. But we also were pretty sure there's going to be one hell of a battle if you would have spent. I think I remember reading someplace afterwards that the MacArthur had planned one hell of a big invasion. And my first reaction was, that's just like him. Then suddenly realized it would have had to been even bigger than a D-Day invasion to do it, Japan. So it would have been one miserable mess.
Oh, it was.
And people don't realize that.
Hundreds of thousands of people killed.
Well, they don't realize that despite how bad the bomb was, that it, I don't know how many more lives would have died on both sides if that hadn't ended the war. And I mean, there's an excellent chance that there'd be a lot fewer of us who were in the Pacific would be here today if we had to invade because, well, I just say, the Japanese did not surrender, like those 4 guys that were on Caballo Island. They knew we were there. They could have surrendered. They didn't.
Yeah.
And what's the Japanese code? And people don't realize that you die fighting. You don't surrender.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was even the civilians.
Yeah. Well, that's it, because it was in Okinawa or somewhere there where the civilians jumped to their death rather than that would.
Yeah.
To surrender.
Surrender wasn't part of their code.
Yeah, and they knew that would have had every man, woman, and child in Japan would have taken up whatever weapons they could have if we actually had to invade.
So, oh yeah, it would have been a bloody mess.
It would have been, yeah.
Very, very bad. So, what was the talk about? Was there much talk about the atomic bomb after you'd heard about it? Or was the preoccupation with the war ending?
I think it was preoccupation with the war ending, because I'm not sure if we really knew what the bomb really was. We stopped to think about it. We just knew that something had happened, and, and the Japanese had surrendered.
Yeah. Yeah. So you went out, and what was the feeling like? Was there everybody just really jubilant within the Army that you were with?
Well, in our area, yeah. I mean, because at that point we were just the ones within the radio school, but I'm sure everybody else was equally happy with this.
Yeah.
We were not looking forward to the invasion.
No, I don't think. And they were even bringing a bunch of troops back from Europe at that point, trying to, looking for them training for a large possible Japanese invasion. So it was starting to really have a big buildup.
Like I say, it would have been one hell of a project.
Yeah. How long was it while you were at Manila before they decided they were gonna move you guys into Korea as an occupation force? Did that take very long?
I don't think so, because the war ended in August, and I think it was probably, I'm guessing maybe October, but I don't really know for sure when it was that we actually moved, took the troop ship up to Korea, and we got through. We were in the tail end of a typhoon when on our way up there, because I remember that usually they had a daily inspection, but so many guys were sick and throwing up that they had to skip the inspection for a couple of days there. And I was lucky I didn't get seasick, and I found out if I got up on top, face forward, and looked, I was quite happy I was still able to eat. But you remember the destroyer escorts are pretty small ships, and occasionally you could see them going so high that you could see underneath them as they were bouncing. So that's how rough the ocean was. It
sounds pretty rough.
Yeah.
To be able to, yeah.
Yeah, and then when the war ended, before we knew we were going to Korea, there was a rumor said we were going to maybe Japan or like that, and it turns out we ended up in a small little town called Erie or Riri, depending whether you're the Japanese or Korean thing. It was a sort of a railroad station, sort of halfway between Seoul and Busan. Small little town, and that's where we ended up. Although at one point there I did get a chance to go up to Seoul for a few days.
So you were in the southern portion of southeastern or southwestern portion of Korea then?
Yeah.
Where you were, and how long were you there as part of an occupation force?
Well, I was there until I got eligible for discharge, which is somewhere either July or August of '46. But I was, and so we didn't have anything to do really. And for a while, I was writing an article for our little battalion newsletter, and I wrote something about condemning how some of the GIs were acting like we were, conquerors like that, and we weren't. And the regimental paper saw my article and contacted me and said, "Want to know if I would like to transfer there and be write-in." This is, I told him, frankly, I would like that very much, but I'm just about ready to go home, so so I missed my chance of being a writer on that. And I have probably copies of some of the things I wrote when I was in that way.
So were you writing before you were in Korea? Did you write much while you were in the Philippines?
Not really. I mean, I was in a writers club in high school until I had and it turned out that what I was best at was writing humorous essays. I was not terrible at poetry. And things like that. And I just kind of write articles, with a little try to touch of humor, and enjoyed it. Yeah.
So how did you start writing with your battalion? Did someone come to you, or did you just start?
I can't remember exactly how I started that, but they were. I was in with a bunch I was putting together, and I had a couple ideas, and they printed it. And nothing special. Just short little things, and I think I've got copies of it somewhere in there.
Were they weekly or monthly articles that was printed?
Probably weekly. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if they're.
What were you doing when you were occupational force? What were some of your duties in Korea?
Not much, just being there. I mean, seriously. I mean, I was part of the. Oh, about that time, they found out that I could type. And funny thing is, when I was on at Leyte, they asked me to type, and I said no because I'd had a year of typing in high school. Because my writing is so bad that I knew if I was going to go to college, I better learn how to type.
Yeah.
So I say that as I wrote somewhere there that I probably could have sat out the war just being there as a typist, but I'm not. Since I had no damage, I don't regret having it. Anyhow, they were trying to figure out what to do with us, and they needed a new clerk typist at the battalion headquarters. So I got assigned as being the clerk typist at the headquarters company.
Mm-hmm.
And
so you were with headquarters company while you were in Korea?
Yeah. At the battalion headquarters.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. At least, yeah.
And when were you discharged then? Or as far as what was the process for you to come back from Korea? Do you remember the name of the boat you came back on and those things?
I've got it written somewhere, but I didn't. Let's see.
Yeah, we'll look through that in just a second.
I got it somewhere.
So when you came back, this was in the.
It was a pretty nice ship, and I also wrote for the ship's paper there too, a couple of articles, not much.
Mm-hmm.
And we came back to Seattle, Fort Lewis, and funny thing is I don't remember anything about Fort Lewis. I just remember there, and then we were processed for discharge, and put on a train for Los Angeles. And again, I know we took the train down to L.A., but I don't remember a bit about that trip. It's one of the funny things there. Till I got to Los Angeles, and then from there I took the streetcar back to Long Beach and got home. And
yeah, that was in. Was that in the winter of 45, 40, or in the fall of 46?
Or fall of 46. Yeah.
Fall of 46.
I think I was discharged in August. Again, that's on my discharge thing. What are some of the
items you're most proud of having served in World War II?
Well, I don't know. I mean, what little combat I had, and that like I say, that's they talk about whether you get how you react under tension. I figured out. I got to change my hearing aid battery. I remember that at the time, when I was having that my little battle there, that like I say, I was pretty calm and thinking. Like I said, that I had that. Remembered that what the guy told me about where to hit somebody, shoot somebody. But I just shooting away and like I say, and firing that one shot at these other guys to just encourage them to keep going. And
yeah,
that was it. One more thing, which might be an interesting thing.
Yeah.
When I was in the basic training, I had no idea what my school, AGC was. That's the thing. And near the end of training, they said if you have 110 or better, you can try for OCS, Officer Candidate School. Well, I didn't know if I had 110 or not. Of course, I would have been made a lousy officer anyhow, but that's beside the point. But later on, I did find out what my score was. It turned out it was 153, which is pretty high.
Mm-hmm.
And somewhere while we were in Luzon, we got a thing coming around that if you have 135 or better, you can apply for West Point. Well, I was thinking, I don't know, so what the hell? So I put the application in. But then when it came time for the interview, I suddenly thought, well, I'm pretty good at school, but 4 years at West Point, assuming I make it, and then you have to stay in the Army for at least 2 years afterwards. And like I say, not being overly fond of the Army to begin with, plus I could say that maybe I realized that I would probably have made a lousy officer. So I just blew the interview.
Uh-huh. That's with the education 6-year commitment, that's a pretty good commitment of time.
Yeah, I mean, but like I say, I did. Yeah. I did use a GI Bill to go to school when I got out, and to pharmacy school.
So when you did get out, you used the GI Bill and you went to pharmacy school?
Yeah. Well, see, my parents wanted me to go to college, and I was a good student. But frankly, I'm one of those people that, this is giving a little bit of me psychology, that when I was 5, the current medical thing was to take your tonsils out. Although it turns out that was something which is totally unnecessary and also had a much higher mortality rate than is acceptable these days. So I had mine out, and it was okay. And then not too long afterwards, I had a younger sister who was 3, and she had the same thing. And we shared a bedroom, and she hemorrhaged and died that night. And I've never gotten over that, and I think that's one thing that I've always felt that that I'm not going to live that long. I mean, with unconsciously. So all through life, the only thing I've ever planned once I became an adult is my vacations, because everything else is like serendipity. My parents wanted me to go to college, but because I never had any idea what I wanted to be when I grew up, because I guess psychologically, I didn't think I was going to grow up. And they'd always wanted a pharmacist in the family. Well, I like science, and I did okay in chemistry, so I went there. And when I was in the middle of pharmacy school, the Army had a thing where you could take a, I can't remember what the thing was, to talk to a psychologist about, because I was having a little personal problems at the time, having nothing to do with school. And the guy looked at my thing and says, well, this is great. Says, frankly, you're definitely college material. And your first choice, frankly, should be medicine. Well, I could not see myself as a doctor. I hate the sight of a lot of blood. And it turns out, especially, and I would have had absolutely no bedside manner at that point in my life. I mean, I also had a problem as a pharmacist of getting along with people. That's something else. So, but said, okay, second choice would be dentistry. I had absolutely no interest in dentistry. Says, and your third choice, you could be a pharmacist. It's okay. And said, you have slightly some artistic leanings, but not enough to worry about it.
Yeah.
So
did you spend your career then in pharmacy in Southern California?
Yeah. I mean, I was when I got out, I only took the California State Board. Some of the guys would go to Nevada, because if you take the California Board, it's only good in California, because California, a lot of people would take their training elsewhere and want to come to California to live and work, so that they were more stringent about licensing.
Yeah.
And the same way as far as reciprocity, other things there. So it was all spent in California, and I spent, and I started out in S50, because they'd hired almost anybody that way. And it wasn't bad, but I didn't like, the store I got stuck in was at 5th and Hill in downtown L.A. And a lot of, not exactly tramps, but not a high-quality neighborhood. The darn thing is too peeping. Oh, crap.
Well, we'll wrap it up.
Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah. Anyhow, so I happened to talk to one of the salesmen, and I found a job out at the Bay Pharmacy, which is interesting, because the Bay Pharmacy was owned by a guy who had married into the Schwab family. You ever hear of Schwab's Pharmacy? Okay, well, the people who went to Schwab's Pharmacy, who moved out to the Pacific Palisades, would go to that store. So we had a lot of movie people there. I mean, John Payne and Jerry Lewis and things like that. It was kind of interesting. But after a while, I got tired of that, because the hours were kind of rough.
Yeah.
And I talked to another salesman and said, well, Cedars 11 Hospital looking for somebody. And I enjoyed hospital work. And I was working there, and one day I'm standing in the corner waiting for a light like that, and a buddy of mine comes by that we'd gone to pharmacy school together. And he was working at Kaiser, which is just down the street from Cedars of Lebanon. And Kaiser was union, had better hours, and things like that. And I was, at that point I was engaged to get married, so I switched to Kaiser. And I liked Kaiser, but there was a couple opportunities to be promoted to the guy in charge of the purchasing drugs for the whole area.
Mm-hmm.
And I got passed over, and the second time I got ticked off and complained about that. I even wrote a letter to to Edgar Kaiser complaining about that. And so somehow they got my supervisor, arranged to meet me, and at that point my sideburns were longer than they are now.
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, Lou, for one thing, your sideburns," like that. So I said, "If that's all that's keeping me from being promoted, I'll shave them off." End of interview. He just did not want to promote me, and my feeling was this: that he himself was capable, but he did not like somebody under him who was not a yes man.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not a yes man. I mean, anyway, he couldn't be that thing, but so I got so mad that I quit. Went back to work for Thrifty, and I really enjoyed hospital work, but I gave up any illusions of grandeur, and that's where I stayed for the rest of my.
So your GI Bill helped you go through pharmacy school, and you had a career in pharmacy then, and working at various places. Did you have you since then? Did your military career help you in any other way that you through life? Obviously, the GI Bill helped you out, but is there any other benefits or things that you realized from your service?
This darn thing is still acting up. I'll worry about that. Not really, and I'm not too much of a joiner. I mean, I haven't joined any of the veterans organizations because it's just and not to brag, but the only organization I joined that I really enjoyed was Mensa, and that's where I met her mother.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the only organization that I felt comfortable at, if you know what I mean. It just I'm not sure, not just being superior or anything like that, but it's just a place that carry on conversations in all directions. You have to explain yourself, and there's not everybody was just like in any group. There's always a few people you get along with, but in general, I really enjoyed it. And I had always been kind of a shy guy, and it got me out of my shell. And also, like I say, I was active. I was a treasurer of the greater LA area and things like that, and that's where I met her mother.
And that's good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll wrap this up. Thank you very much for your service. Thank you. Thank you for the interview.
Yeah.